So it's said that the Buddha is like a doctor, that the Dharma is like medicine, and the Sangha are the nurses that help us take the medicine. And we are the patient. And I will say, I'll admit that I get quite confused about how to take the medicine. I know we are the only ones that can do it. No one else can take it for us. And we can be in this environment where we have many nurses wanting to help us. And we have plenty of medicine. We have medicine all the time. And we have amazing teachers. And I can still get really confused about how in the world do I take this medicine? Lama Yeshe said, be your own therapist. So I've been thinking, there's so much to know about our mind, about what our mind will respond well to, what our mind will react to negatively. In Venerable Kadro's book, the new book, How to Meditate on the Stages of the Path, she writes this about Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe was once asked by a student how we can know if we are meditating correctly. He replied that if we notice an increase in our kindness, patience, and ability to get along well with others, that means our practice is going well. Right? On the other hand, if we are becoming more unkind, impatient, and selfish, and our relationships with others are fraught with problems, something isn't right with our practice. So, the last half or so of the winter retreat, I noticed I was digging a little bit of a ditch. And I didn't know what it was, or how I was digging it, or how, I was like, something is wrong here. But what I've come to since the retreat ended, and it's amazing, I'm quite slow on the uptake. It takes a long time for me to figure out what went wrong. I was doing everything right. Well, not exactly. So I've been investigating discouragement and how it arises, how it manifests for me, and its antidotes. And interestingly, I have looked at this topic many times, and I keep coming back to Lama Tsongkhapa's chapter in the Lamrim Chimo about joyous effort. And every time I think, wow, that's so amazing. What a wonderful teaching. It's incredible. And I keep forgetting, and I keep rediscovering it. So I thought of how this has worked in my mind. And this roughly correlates to the 3 types of discouragement that he describes, although I'm phrasing it a little differently because this is how it comes up for me. So the first cause that I've identified is an over-identification with the afflictions. I am my anger. I am my jealousy. I'm just a jealous person. That's just who I am. And then I tell a story about it. I go over and over and over again about why this is the case. This is who I am. This is my identity. I act out on it. I justify it. So this is basically discouragement about the goal, because I don't see how I can get to the goal. It seems like this is me, an afflicted sentient being, and the goal is Buddhahood, and I can't make sense of it. So what I've thought about in terms of the remedy is that these afflictions are impersonal phenomena, right? They're not to actually be identified with. And that as long as I'm not identifying with them, as long as I'm not telling a story about them, then I can retain some influence over them. But as long as I'm bought into them 100%, then I have absolutely no power. So I was thinking that it really only takes 1% of my mind to stop identifying with an affliction. So 99% of my mind can be jealous or angry or whatever. But if I can keep that 1% not identified with the affliction, then I find that I can still think about the goal. I can still have some influence. And this has been incredibly inspiring. And interestingly, since I didn't have much time to prepare this, I went to my folder on my computer of BBC's, like ideas for BBCs. And one of them was 1%. So that was the first thought I had about how to work with this over-identification as one of these causes of discouragement. The second one was, I've noticed in my practice, I'll be able to identify, okay, this is a habit in my mind. This is something that comes up over and over and over again. And I can even think, okay, I'm going to start applying the antidote. And I do. I make a schedule. I'm applying the antidote every evening. And I notice the affliction is still there. So then I have discouragement about the means. It's not working. This antidote just doesn't work. So the antidote is flawed, which I'm saying the Dharma is flawed. So there's a problem there. I remember in I think it was this past Exploring Monastic Life, we were talking about sexual attachment. And several people said, oh yes, I meditate on the antidote, foulness of the body, but it doesn't work. And Venerable very clearly said, it works. You just have to keep applying it. And that really struck me, how quickly I can dismiss and say, this doesn't work. But I mean, I need to get realistic, right? I've had these afflictions since beginningless time. So even if the antidotes are very powerful, which they are, the habit is very powerful. So I have to keep applying these over and over and over and over again. So the problem is actually not the antidote. So it's not that the antidote doesn't work, but it's that when causes and conditions are present, then jealousy will continue to arise. This is what Geshe Topke has been teaching us, dependent arising, dependent origination. When these causes and conditions are there, their effects arise. And so it simply means that I need to keep applying the antidote. That's it. It doesn't mean I'm terrible. It doesn't mean I'm always going to be jealous or angry or whatever it is. So that's, getting clear about discouragement about the means, or about thinking that, the method that the Buddha prescribed doesn't work. So then the last sort of cause that I identified for discouragement is the inappropriate attention on what isn't going well. So I have this as also a really big habit. And I think related to this is focusing only on the first two truths, only on dukkha and its causes, and getting stuck there. And I'm really interested in dukkha, and I get really interested in going through the causes of it. And then I can sit on my meditation cushion and say, yep, I have that kind of dukkha, I have that kind of dukkha, I have that kind of dukkha, and I have that cause, and I create that cause. That's not very encouraging. So this is really the extreme that thinks this is going terribly, this retreat was terrible, this session is terrible, samsara is terrible, right? See my last BBC about that, about how terrible samsara is. So I correlated this to the discouragement, but because this is the place to practice, this is the only time we have to practice. And so the remedy, I think, here is to balance our focus, right? So if we're stuck on dukkha and its causes, think about cessation and the path to cessation. Or if we're getting stuck in this is terrible, this session, is terrible, to really rejoice in the little successes we have. What was really curious was last year, before the winter retreat, I had this daily practice of rejoicing. in my virtue that day. And for some reason, I stopped doing it. And I thought, well, that may be one of the causes for your discouragement. And so I've gone back to it, and it's helping. Surprise, surprise. So to really stay in touch with how my mind is doing, how my mind is reacting to what I'm meditating on, I can get quite in a rut. And I think I need to continually check, what is my plan for what I'm doing, what I'm meditating on, is it working or is it not? So maybe I'm meditating too much on suffering. Maybe I need to meditate on something else. And so I think in this way, to really be our own therapist, to be our own doctor, to understand how we apply the medicine of the Dharma is to really stay in touch with how is this landing for me, right? And not just go on automatic, on autopilot. And so related to that, I went back to this quote that Shantideva has in his training anthology. And I really love it. So he says this: I should always be a good student, studying with my teacher, myself. Even if I don't ask myself for teachings, who is hurt by my pain? Who is frightened by my fear? Who knows my problems and reactive patterns as well as my spiritual teacher, myself? And how could there be a student as good as myself? I am far from indifferent, and I won't run away. I'm an object of compassion, and I'm always close by. So of course, this doesn't mean that we don't need our teachers. Of course, we need our teachers. But ultimately, our teacher is not sitting there in the meditation hall with us. I mean, and even if they were, they're not necessarily, well, I don't know, maybe they are seeing what we're meditating on. But the point is, we have to figure it out. And so it's really up to us to figure out what's working, what's not working. And so I think, in conclusion, really learning the teachings is one thing, and we have to learn the teachings. We need to learn them. But then we also need to figure out, how am I going to apply this? And I think that's what I'm continually thinking about. And it's always a matter of, it's not having a bad session or a bad week or whatever, and then chucking the whole thing out. But it's rather tweaking, tweak. So I know I dug myself into a really deep discouragement ditch, and I am climbing out.